Hey everyone, and welcome to our SFI Biweekly briefings at Tuesdays at 2. I'm Sarah, SFI's Executive Director.
And I'm Janessa. I work with the Voter Focus Group Project.
With primary elections kicking off this spring, we thought it would be useful to spend this week's episode checking in on our voter outreach project. So you may remember earlier this year that SFI put out a military voter survey to our community. Well, the results are in, and Janessa and I are here to talk about them.
All right, let's get started, Sarah. What is the SFI Voter Focus Survey all about?
Yeah. So SFI launched with your great assistance, Janessa, a two-part voter project last fall with the goal of better understanding how folks in our military community think about voting and elections in general. So the first part of that project is a focus group that we convene every quarter. And the second part of this project is this survey. So the survey helped us identify motivations and challenges that military partners and family members experience toward voting. We wanted to see if members of our community had any bits of either misinformation or concerns about elections that we could be helpful in both better understanding and then, of course, responding to. So with this survey, we reached the partners and family members of service members across 5 branches. We included active duty, veteran, guard, and reserve families as well. And we're hopeful that these findings will serve as a starting point for future work on mis and disinformation campaigns that target military spouses and families.
Great, thank you for that intro, Sarah. Before we launch into the findings, can you clarify a few terms for us? So we would like to know the difference between misinformation and disinformation, because those do come up a lot.
Totally. And I honestly get the mix up all the time. So super sympathy to folks who do. So misinformation is just information that's either false or incorrect. It's not necessarily created or shared with any sort of malicious intent to cause harm. It's just information that's untrue or not entirely accurate. Misinformation is unfortunately pretty easy to spread when you get something lost in translation, or you spread rumors, or even just reading an outdated article. Now, disinformation is also information that's false, but it's deliberately designed or fabricated in order to cause harm. So it does have a malicious intent behind it. There's an intention to create inaccurate messaging or to target specific individuals with that information. Now, our survey focused on misinformation more so than disinformation. We just wanted to see what was out there that might not be fully true that we could help clarify, as well as just general misunderstandings, confusions, or gaps in knowledge, because we didn't want that to get in the way of folks casting their ballots this year.
All right, good to know. Thanks for clearing that up. I also get the two confused, and you hear them. Sometimes people try to use them interchangeably, so it's just good to know the differentiation before we launch into this. So let's talk about the biggest findings from the survey. And what we found, with this survey, we wanted to get a pulse on voter confidence in the electoral process. And we found that the majority, or 71% of our respondents, believe that mail-in voting is just as secure as in-person voting. So this aligns with the fact that the majority of military voters cast their ballots by mail, either through the absentee or mail-in process. So we were really happy to see high confidence in the mail-in voting process. However, despite the high confidence in the security of mail-in voting, just over half, around 52% of respondents, believe that their military ballots are actually counted.
Which was a super surprising data point to you and me both, Janessa. Could you elaborate a little bit on why you think that this is the case?
Yeah, so we were a little bit surprised to see that disconnect between what the confidence in the mail-in process versus whether your vote was actually counted. And our survey suggested that there was some mistrust and misinformation surrounding the mail-in voting process, including uncertainty about how to actually track your mail-in ballot to make sure that it's received and counted by the election office. There was a lack of distinction between absentee versus mail-in voting, difficulties with voter registration as military families, and general confusion about questions regarding timelines and submission processes. So just if you get your ballot in, you might trust that the mail-in process is secure, but is your ballot going to make it there on time to actually get voted? These questions came up especially with our overseas voters.
Yeah, cannot understate how interesting this survey was for helping us get a little bit more detail behind these things. And Janessa, in that last bit, you mentioned another kind of terminology alert, we could say. You used the terms absentee and then mail-in voting. What is the difference? Because those are also terms that lots of people use interchangeably that you and I also get mixed up sometimes.
Yeah, actually, I was looking a lot into this during the process because I've used those terms interchangeably in the past and wanted to get some clarity as well. The biggest difference between the two is that absentee voting requires a voter to specifically request a ballot to be mailed to them. So voters have to fill out the absentee ballot and they do mail it back. Typically, an absentee ballot refers to when a voter is unable to vote in person on election day. For example, a military family member who is located physically outside their state of residence may request an absentee ballot because they cannot be there in person on election day. When requesting an absentee ballot, some states, though not all of them, require you to give a reason for why you are unable to be there in person. On the other side of that, we have mail-in voting. So some states, including Hawaii, California, Washington, New Jersey, and I believe there are a few others as well, automatically mail a ballot to all registered voters. So everyone in their state has access to a mail-in ballot. You don't have to request it like the absentee process. And then you can fill out that ballot by mail and send it back. Or you can wait and vote in person on election day instead. But the option for mail-in voting is available to everyone in a few of those states.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying that. And gosh, with all of these different states and everything that's different, I remember when I lived in Nebraska, it was an absentee voting system, but when you gave your excuse, you could opt in permanently to the absentee voting rule. So it became a bit of a mail-in voting. It was like this hybrid system. It was unique. But anyway, it's understandable why these two terms would be confusing even to the likes of us, because both of them can involve submitting ballots through the mail. So anyway, I just really appreciate you delving into that for us, Janessa. Tell us a little bit more about what else you found from the survey.
Yeah, so overall, we were trying to get a sense of people's confidence in the electoral process, and we found that 56% of respondents expressed high confidence in the electoral process. Yet when we asked whether confidence in the election process has increased, decreased, or stayed the same, 30% of respondents expressed low or decreased confidence in the electoral process over the last 2 years. So their confidence actually went down or remained low since the last election in 2020.
Yeah, we were so glad to see that there was generally high confidence amongst the majority of our community, but also concerned about what was causing either the decrease or, like you said, state continued low levels of confidence. And what I thought most interesting was what was driving people to have low confidence. Could you tell us about the differences with how different people came to that outcome?
Yeah, so this part was really interesting because we did have some qualitative information as well in the survey. And what we found was that the decrease came from individuals across the political spectrum with many different ideologies. So it isn't an issue that just impacts like Republicans or Democrats. The people who were experiencing decreased confidence were coming from across the political spectrum. And I think that's important for people to remember when we do live in such a politicized, divided society at the moment. And so some of the reasons that respondents listed for the decrease in confidence centered around concerns about ballot counting and mail-in voting, as well as concerns about political infighting, divisive rhetoric, and concerns about interference from politicians trying to stay in office. So definitely there was concern and sort of a lack of confidence because of sort of maybe this political rhetoric that is very divisive that we've been seeing. And then the second part of our findings was that 53% of respondents have experienced barriers to voting. This is something we have seen in other military-affiliated voting surveys as well. And especially among our overseas voters, there were experiences with delays about receiving and submitting ballots. There were also stories that we heard from military partners who experienced barriers to the registration process due to residency and ballot request issues as well.
And when you get frustrated trying to register, trying to cast your ballot, of course, it's going to leave you like a bad taste in your mouth and feeling not confident that the way things are run are meant for you.
Right. So we do only have a few minutes left. I know these briefings go so quickly because there's always so much you want to include. I did want to give you just a minute, Sarah, because when we talk about the barriers that military members experience with voting, this really resonated with the Q&A session you hosted recently with the Federal Voting Assistance Program. So I know we only have a few minutes, but I was hoping you could just give us a quick update on what that process has been about.
Totally. And this is a recording that's continued to be available for folks if you want to go back and watch our event. It was super interesting. FF experts, they know what they're talking about. But the big takeaway from that session, FF shared what the number one most common source of confusion is for military voters. And that has to do with the question of where you're supposed to register to vote. So what is the voting residence of a military voter? Number one question. Real quickly, FDAP does recommend if you're a military service member, you're going to want to use whatever your official residency is. That's typically what's on your LES or leave and earnings statement. It's where you've kind of declared legally and at one point physically the address that you are supposed to vote, pay taxes, etc. For military spouses, we get this choice. We have one residency, much like our service members do, and it can either be the same residency that our service member has, or it might be a different residency that we established kind of on our own. If you're a working person with a W-2 yourself, it might be the address that's on there. If you don't have a W-2 to reference, looking back at records to see where it is you last declared residency and then deciding if you want to keep that or if you want to change it for one reason or another. That's a really quick answer. We have a lot more detailed blog posts about the issue, but Janessa, I think you have a personal story related to this, don't you?
Well, I mean, I just moved to a new state, and so I wasn't really sure what to be doing in terms of my own residence and how am I supposed to update this information? Should I be updating it? Because I'm still voting in my state of residency. So what should I do
Yes.
to update my information?
Absolutely. So while, like you said, Janessa, your residency has not changed, even though you moved. So the place that you're going to be voting, still the same. But what has changed? Your mailing address. What's changed is where your absentee voting ballot needs to be sent, which means that, yes, Janessa, you should be updating your voter resident registration information that's on file so that your local election official knows where to send their ballot. And the best way to do this for any military connected voter is to use the Federal Postcard Application, or FPCA. Any military service member or dependent who plans to vote somewhere other than where they're living this year, currently due to military orders, should use this FPCA. It's an awesome form that lets you register to vote, request an absentee ballot, update your mailing address, all of these things all in one form. You can't fill it out too many times, so don't be shy about anytime something changes, sending it back to your election official and making sure they have the most updated information.
Awesome. Thank you for bringing up the postcard application, because that was also in our survey a big point of confusion. What is it? How does it work? So I think what you've just said brings us to our call of action for the week, which is to fill out your federal postcard application to make sure that your voter registration is up to date and that you have made sure you've requested your ballot for the 2022 election cycle. I am one of those people who needs to take this action item serious this week because I have not filled it out since I've moved, and our primaries have already started up across the country. So it is time. Go figure out what is this federal postcard application, fill it out. You can go to fvap.gov to fill it out. And as Sarah said, you can't fill it out too many times. And so we'll include the link to that below, but I would definitely recommend that. And if you still have questions about how it works or other voting questions, you can view the video that Sarah referenced with the FVAP Federal Voting Assistance Program Q&As as well. So we'll include that in the comments. So those are my two items. And while you're on the website, you might as well sign up for custom election reminders. So when you go to our website to view that video, you can sign up for custom election reminders that will tell you when the deadlines are in your state of residence for all of your voting needs this year.
We're trying to make it easy as possible, folks. All right, one last call to action here at the very end. If you are a teenager, or there is a teenager in your family or a family you know who is eager to vote this year, use our brand new resource in partnership with NMFA. It is militaryteenvoter.com.org. Either one, it'll get you there. That has everything that military teens who are turning 18 for the first time and want to know where the heck they're supposed to vote can go for that information. Please check it out. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in for yet another briefing. We're glad you did, and we hope to see you back next time in 2 more weeks. And thanks, Janessa, so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.